Good afternoon to all of you joining, and hello to those of you who are listening on the webinar recording. Today, we're going to go through the Streamlining Architecture and Modeling webinar. This session will be hosted by John Castellino, the Senior Sales Manager for the APAC region. I'm speaking at the moment, and Zaki will be going through the functional demo today and showing us more of the slides as well. I'll pass to Zach to quickly say hello.
Yeah, thank you, John, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks. So as mentioned before, as an overview of what we're going through today, we'll be going through modeling in enterprise architecture using ABACUS, REA tool. We'll be implementing architecture models and then looking at some architecture deliverables. And we'll try and save Q&A for the end of the session. That said, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. There will be a moderator to have a look at those questions and share those with us. Okay, so in this slide, we'll just go through a little bit about us. So Avolution is the name of our company, and ABACUS is the name of our product. We've been a leading enterprise architecture company for over 23 years now. We have offices globally. So today I'm speaking to you from Melbourne. However, our head office is in Sydney. We also have we have a regional office in Singapore, major offices in London in the United Kingdom, Washington, DC in the USA, and then various offices in other parts of the world like UAE, in Dubai, and in Latin America, Canada, and so on. We're a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave, and we've also been rated as the #1 tool by various independent tool reviews. ABACUS has reached thousands of users, so I believe the latest figure is over 3,000 users or architects have modeled using ABACUS. And we've reached over 100 different countries globally too. Our tool supports over 100 different frameworks and notations. So about 30 or 40 of those frameworks and notations are available out of the box. And an important point to note with ABACUS is that frameworks and notations can be easily made hybrid. So it's easy to edit and change those notations to suit your needs. TOGAF and Archimate are open certified, but we also have major frameworks like BPMN, Accord, Bind, NIST, and many others. So we'll just quickly pause and go through a slide here. So we have a slide explaining from Gartner, and they have something called the Critical Capabilities Analysis, where they rank ABACUS against other leading EA vendors in the space. So ABACUS has been ranked as the #1 vendor when it comes to enterprise transformation management, IT portfolio management, advanced road mapping, which is pretty critical for a enterprise architecture tool, solution architecture, design and delivery, and in modeling, innovation and sustainability. ABACUS has been recognized as a leader for the past 7 consecutive years. We've been a leading enterprise architecture tool, as I mentioned before, for 23 years, and we've been rated highly as a leader in other analyst reports such as Forrester, Syricom, Pragmatic, Ovum, and many others. So I'll quickly go through our ABACUS licensing. So we like to use the analogy of a tree when explaining ABACUS licensing. And sorry, excuse me, there's 2 major users which we tend to have, which is the ABACUS Studio users, who are our power users, and our ABACUS Enterprise users, who are sort of our dashboard users. Now, in explaining the difference between these two users, is our Abacus Studio users tend to be our users who set admin permissions, viewpoints. They can edit and create viewpoints. They can also edit and create the better model and make changes there, configure reports, and so on. The enterprise users, when we again use the analogy of a tree, are the leaves of the tree, and the Abacus Studio users are the roots of the tree. So when we say that the enterprise users are the leaves of the tree, the work which they work on within the dashboards is the part of Abacus which everyone in the organization can see. So if you buy an Abacus bundle, there's actually unlimited read-only viewers which you can create. And this is quite important because over here, this is where you can create dashboards which are specific to the types of users who you have in your organization. So say, for example, you have a finance user, then they may want to see a finance dashboard, which is specified just for them. Then you can use Abacus Enterprise to create those portlets and to create that dashboard. You can also embed those dashboards in Teams. Those dashboards are interactive because they pick data in real time or show data in real time. And there's a number of rich dynamic visualizations within those dashboards. Abacus also works with various data integrations. So those data integrations include the ability to round trip data in from Excel, so import as well as export data. We can import Visio and also export in .svg and save as Visio. We can import SharePoint list information. We can import Google Sheets information. We can import ServiceNow information. And then there's also an integration with Flexera's Technopedia Sync. That's quite important because Flexera, or their Technopedia Sync, is able to actually populate real-time information about hardware assets in your model. So say, for example, you have an Oracle server, the type of information which would be imported there is information such as lifecycle information, support dates, costs, etc. And that gives you a much better understanding of overall costs in your model, as well as the time where changes may need to be made. Abacus is different from other tools in the market as we have various analytics features which are not available in the other tools. So we have a no-code algorithm, and we also have the ability to, or there's metrics built into the tool, such as total cost of ownership, which you can check. You can measure the reliability of servers and so on. Last but not least, Abacus is built on a subversion. So when multiple users are using Abacus, they can save their Abacus files in Studio. And the way that it would work is they can commit their changes. So if they commit their changes, then an administrator who's using Subversion is able to say the changes which are approved. And if necessary, reject certain changes as well. And this enables multiple people to be working on Abacus at the same time, but also to roll back to an earlier version if that's required. If you're using the dashboard or enterprise tool, if you make a change, then those changes are committed automatically after a set period of time. And just to give everyone an idea of the difference between the user interfaces of the tool, the enterprise kind of dashboards, which I've explained before, right here on the left, the catalog features and the diagram. And then the Studio interface is on the right, and you can see there's a bit more permissions built in and more capability built in for the Studio users, collaboration server being in the middle, allowing that data transfer. Okay, so we'll quickly go through the uses of Abacus by various stakeholders out there. So as mentioned before, Abacus supports popular frameworks and notations, including TOGAF and Archimate, which were open certified, BPM, Bion, NIST, many others. So the key kind of actions which a enterprise architecture team or solution architects would like to do is maybe model their security or risk management. So again, you think about NIST or those kind of frameworks. Application rationalization and transformation is probably the key use case. So over here, we're thinking of getting a whole picture of what all of your application and hardware assets are, as well as an idea of your processes and mapping all of that information. And once you have an idea of your current state, then you can have a look at what your to-be state might be, or do that sort of what-if analysis, and that's what ABACUS can help with quite a bit. We put in cloud migration, but really any server migration can be modeled in ABACUS, and you can look at the impacts of that. Road mapping and modeling is a key strength of the tool, modeling innovation and ideation. All sorts of diagrams can be made in ABACUS. On that point, business process management and communication, so your BPMN type start, objective, goal sort of modeling is in there. And then tackling technical debt. So you can have a look at, as I mentioned before, metrics such as total cost of ownership, as well as other cost metrics to get an idea of what your overall costs are for your organization. So we have a quick case study before handing over to Zach for the functional demo. So we have Horizon, which is a customer here in Australia. They do pit to port sort of operations where they help with the logistics of getting mining material from the mine over to the ports out for export. Now, Horizon's been a ABACUS customer for just over 5 years now. As mentioned, they're quite a large company when it comes to logistics and transport. Why they chose ABACUS was they chose ABACUS to get a full picture of what technology assets they had at their company. And the benefits of using ABACUS was it was an easy way of being able to integrate a lot of their artifacts from other places, such as SharePoint and Visio. The browser-based ABACUS Enterprise tool allowed a lot of self-service work to go on and also communicated information really well. And there was quite a lot of benefits in being able to get a full picture of their current state and to do the to-be analysis as well. So we will share a copy of the slides. And if you're interested in more case studies, just let us know. That said, I'll move on and we will pass over. So Zach, I will pass control to you to progress the presentation from here.
Yeah. Thank you, John. When we start thinking about modeling the architecture, one of the first things we tend to come across is usually solution architecture team and how that really underpins some of the EA work that goes on within an organization. So this is going to be the first area we look at, and it will be one of the areas we'll cover during the live demo soon. From a solution architecture space, what we are really looking at here is how solution architecture is developed across a number of steps. And hopefully these are similar to other domains you are working on as well. The idea here is we try to define some kind of problems or some kind of requirement statement. So this could be solving a particular solution within the organization, or even just developing entire new solutions as well. So this usually leads to some high-level design down to a low-level design. For example, this could be design and HLD documents that we want to bring into ABACUS, and finally down to implementation and deployment stage. So this is how we actually use that particular solution across the organizations as well. When we start looking at the design phase of this, One of the things to consider is the stakeholders who are involved. We may have specific enterprise architects or domain architects building this type of blueprints, but then we also have technical architects who look at low-level designs. When we start thinking about how ABACUS is going to be used across this area, it is important to know who the stakeholders are and who are these documents going to be presented to. Where enterprise architecture comes into play is essentially the fact from a EA perspective. What we're trying to do here is model the entire stack within that organization, all the way from high-level business concept, for example, strategic operating model, project and programs, down through to a data model or databases, typically around application, technology, or infrastructure domain, and then some level of ownership across that organization chart as well that you might want to build. The meta model we are using is really how we define the enterprise architecture within ABACUS, and the idea is it is then suitable for defining and addressing multiple different domains. Whether you are looking to build business process, whether you're building a deployment view using Azure or AWS library, or you're building strategic portfolio based off something like business motivational model. So all these different domains can actually hang together in a single model. What you are seeing on the right-hand side is a diagram illustrating our evolution framework. So this is actually a combination of other framework and notations, which include things like TOGAF, ITIL, and the BPMN. And just like we mentioned earlier, we actually recommend trying to combine different notations and framework together and using effectively a best practice model. However, if you are TOGAF or Archimate certified, and that's exactly what you want to use, of course, we have this framework that built in and supported out of the box, and you can find it from our standard library. However, we do find that usually there will be some level of customization required when you actually model. If it's not around the framework itself, it could be around the attributes or the properties you want to capture as well. And in ABACUS, we make it very easy for you to customize and modify the framework, and you have complete control over it. Yeah. So the next step is implementing architecture models. The next phase is trying to implement some of these architecture models within the solution. Like we mentioned before, the scope here is really defining the meta model itself. And what we are trying to look at is how we actually defining something like a current state within that particular architecture. From there, we typically narrow down the scope when we start looking at a specific data set. We might create some kind of what-if scenarios in the model and trying to decide the future state that we want to build. And then when we look at some of these design phases that we go through and trying to make use of specific solutions for deployment or using deployment diagrams for using infrastructure notations that we have, we're trying to understand what pattern can be reused. So this could be TOGAF terminology, it can be solution building block, architecture building block, etc. We then start reuse this content across the model. A big part of ABACUS is analyze that data set, which will not cover it in today's session. However, yeah, our team can send you a white paper and documents if you are interested in that. Analyzing the data based on the model. So that could be cost estimation. It could be understanding the complexity of your model, the reliability, etc. And in ABACUS, we have built-in algorithms that help you to calculate all these metrics. For example, understanding customer satisfaction score across process and value streams. Analyzing that information is just as important as designing it, and that may require specific algorithms. So once we calculate and analyze the data, we then will be able to look back, get the feedback from that information, then coming back to the initial stage to scope that solution into the meta model, narrow down to the data again, redesign your meta model, and analyze that. So going through different iterations, you'll be able to get a clear idea and understand what you would like to achieve in the future state. I've mentioned solution architects a couple of times, and it's worth to highlight that, as you can see, here are different types of notations that we're supporting out of the box for solution architects who could focus on things like cloud architecture design. For example, we have Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, GCP library out of the box. What this really does, it contains the notational elements that these artifacts that you can build. And of course, once these are built in ABACUS, you can actually reuse this across the model. The important part is, in terms of the wider scoping or wider teams, each of the data elements is going to be connected up or down that repository. So monitor things like dependency, risks, calculating costs across these metrics. For example, technical debt score. So this is where all the modeling aspects fits into the wider EA team. It's not just the architecture designs we're looking at today. There are other aspects to consider around process optimization. If we design specific process for solutions or solutions in ABACUS, we might be starting from a relatively technical view, then looking at infrastructure or application and building specific solution around it. And then we obviously can move down to an actual process level. Here is an example of understanding a particular process and trying to understand or play a what-if scenarios. So for this particular example, how does request information access process work within the EA tool? The key thing here is on this particular view, when we start modeling these solutions or this process, what we're trying to do is provide a view of what today looks like, which is the current state. Then ideally, what we're trying to do is design the future state, which is the to-be state. In this case, we have a particular solution for a process that using legacy platform and relatively classical integrations that happened behind the scene. And on the upgrade process, which is shown in the at the bottom, so that is a possible solution that if we move to a SaaS platform and we use API calls running across the data set. When we make these changes and we can run the algorithms to calculate, it comes down to design and how these affect other parts of the organizations. And the analysis side comes into the KPIs that we're interested in. So in this case, what does the overall complexity and the maintenance score look like if we redesign this particular process? And of course, for this particular one, we are actually able to lower the complexity as well as maintenance. So that's a no-brainer to go for the SaaS platform in this particular process. So when it comes down to building deliverables for this content, there are two main ways that we see deliverables being produced. it's not just within ABACUS, it's actually for EA team in general. The first is through live and interactive views. This actually fits nicely into our ABACUS enterprise. So that's a dashboard live environment, which we'll focus on later. So that's a web-based, and the idea is people can create different dashboard and using that to present information for different teams or different stakeholders. The other is more static or formal view, so that include PDF reports, Microsoft Word documents, or PowerPoint. That's a snapshot of what the repository or what the data look like when you create the documents. And of course, this might be required in some formal meetings or formal presentations. But of course, you can also using our ABACUS report builders to achieve that. And all the data and diagram artifacts can be exported into pictures or PDF, and you can use that to create documents, reports, PowerPoint, etc. ABACUS Enterprise, like I mentioned before, so this is a web-based platform. And what it does is give us the ability to produce different dashboards for different audiences. So over here, I've shown you one of the dashboards we created. And this actually is a collection of different visualizations, or what we call it portrait, as well as diagrams that we created. And also, you can link that a catalog which shows more detailed information. So with ABACUS Enterprise, they actually pull data from the repository regularly. So all the data here is actually up to date, and all these portlets are dynamic visualizations. So people can actually understand and drill down to the level they are interested in. So using different portlets, they can select and filter down to different levels. What I'll do next is start a brand new dashboard. And we'll start creating a process and show you how that fits into ABACUS repository and how broader team can work together and create a EA project together with the EA team. So this is a brand new dashboard, and as you can see, there's various options that you have. There's different type of users, as you mentioned, in ABACUS Enterprise. So first, there's unlimited read-only users, where people with the right permission are able to see the right or permitted dashboard and consume the relevant data. Secondly, which is what I'm logged in as, is the modular users. So they're able to create a new dashboard and modify, create new diagrams if required. So what I'll do is I will select the architecture status. So there's various different architecture status, and we'll focus on this production as is state. And there's different viewpoints that you can choose, and when you're creating diagrams. So viewpoints, when it comes to creating model within the tool, one of the first criteria we have is the type of viewpoints we would like to use. So this coming back to framework like TOGAF or Archimate, they will have specific viewpoints that they might recommend. So you can build specific model across that entire stack. If we were building business capability map, we might use that particular viewpoints. If we are building process diagrams or interface diagrams, there's different viewpoints for those as well. In our terminology, viewpoints do two main things. First, they dictate the style of the diagram. So of course, if you have your own style you want to use, you can actually define and create your own viewpoints or use the viewpoints out of the box. Second thing is the viewpoints control the rules within the model. So the governance and the standardization across these views becomes very important. And it is one of the reasons that people tend to go for something like a EA tool. Because traditionally they may have been using tools like Visio, which gives them lots of flexibility in terms of creating diagrams. However, that lacks of standardization across the organization. So when someone building a view or diagrams, we'll choose the relevant viewpoints. So in this case, we will select the process swimline viewpoints, and I will rename it to create a new in this case. Yeah. So this one is a brand new diagrams. And if I hit the stencil, you'll see there's a list of components and the connections that are available for me to create the diagrams. And of course, this one, they're using process diagrams. So you can see there's capability, process, start event, gateway, etc. And for the connections, based on the meta module that we defined, sequence flow and use support. So these are the connection types that you link the components together. And because these viewpoints I use is for the process, and you can see it doesn't contain components like server or other infrastructure components. So viewpoints actually defined or controlled what you can put inside this particular view. So go ahead and create some organization and by drag and drop. So for this process, we might have a customer trying to log in and access and send their request. Yeah. While I'm drag and drop creating these components in this canvas, it's not just creating these particular diagrams. This customer one, or what I'm doing here, creating a new department organization, is there's options for you to choose if it's existing components within the model, or you can create a new one. And let's say if I'm creating a new one, it's not just adding these new components in the canvas. This data, these components, these two components, is actually being populated in our repository. And I can go ahead and start drag and drop creating new process. So you will start searching, see whether there's any process under that particular that has already been defined in the systems. If not, you can start creating a new one. And from there, you can see there's dynamic connectors. So this actually allows me to link and to create new connections from the process that I have just created. So again, this is based on the meta model and the rules that we defined. So based on that, ABACUS is able to identify what are the possible connections that you can link it to, for example, to gateways via sequence flow connections, to other processes, or to departments. So again, the EA team will focus on defining the meta model, and that restricted basically set up the rules, how for particular viewpoints that's going to look like. And the broader team, they will be able to create the diagrams, and the ABACUS allows them to follow the rules. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start creating the next steps. So for example, the system received And I can start creating new connections as well. Or I can drag and drop, creating new connections within the organization level. So by drag and drop, putting into different organizations, that actually create different groupings. And again, I can link this together. So in this way, people can actually start creating new process and define this process for broader team to understand and follow that process. And while people doing that, all these new components and organizations actually has been populated within the architect repository. So that's using one graph to create this process. Of course, you can also add start event, end event, etc. And what I do is go ahead and add some additional diagrams that we've created for business process. So over here, this one is a business capability map. And this shows all the business capability of different processes, and within each process, what are the process. And the heat map over here is using different properties. And with ABACUS, that's one way where you can use heat map to analyze the data. And you can also link these to other repositories as well. For example, over here, for this business process, it actually lists down there's two main categories. So there's different groupings. And of course, within each groupings, what are the actual processes in over here? For example, for develop and manage human capital processes, these are the breakdown process and their complexity level in this case. So using heat map, you're able to see the complexity level of all these different processes. And people can actually drill down and direct to another process that they selected. So in this case, develop and manage human capital process. You can see what are involved, different teams in this case, by creating involving human capital resources and the employees. So these are the two stakeholders going to be involved in this process, and across different processes, what are the applications that will be required. So in this way, like we mentioned earlier, after building this business process or identifying the process, you are also able to link that process to application levels. So it comes back to understanding the meta model and how you want to link your business domain to your architecture domain, to your application domain, to other domains. And again, that helps you to understand the connections between different components. And ABACUS allows you to go to different diagrams as well. For example, over here, you can actually jump from business process diagram to this application interface diagram. The dream diagram is one way we allow broader team to work and design the process diagrams, design the process. And once we finish that, for example, if you want to create a new dashboard for the broader team, you can also add additional portlet that allow people to identify and understand the information. So that comes down to other visualizations we have, which include over here, there's different pie chart, column chart, line chart, etc. And this actually allows people to have a more visual understanding visual way of understanding and analyze the information. So I'll go ahead and create a capability pie chart. And this could be, so I can select the live information, different information, complexity level, etc. So let's say if I want to analyze the live recommendation stage of the capability. I can go ahead and start creating that particular view. So this pie chart actually shows what are the different life cycle recommendation stage for all the capabilities. And I can go ahead and start adding catalogs. So catalogs, again, that's another artifact that we have that actually captured all the informations. So people can actually customize and select the catalog or the columns they want to use. So over here, these are available columns which capture the properties or the connections of the selected components. And in this case, that's the capability. So for each user, depends on their permissions and depends on what they would like to see. They will be able to customize this catalog. And from here, by using different portlet, they can actually filter down information. So for example, let's say if I want to see all these catalog, all these capability that recommend to retire and eliminate, I can actually use this portlet to filter down, and I can see delivery services. This one is actually recommend to retire or eliminate. And from there, depends on what are the informations. Let's say I want to see who owns this particular capability. So I can actually add the actors or the departments. Then I would be able to understand and know who should I talk to if I want to make any changes in this case. There's another type of users I should mention in ABACUS Enterprise, which is the editor users. So for them, if they are not required to draw diagrams, they can actually update information in the catalog. And again, that will be committed to the repository and the information will be updated as well. So this is the dashboard view of ABACUS Enterprise. With ABACUS Enterprise, we also have a browser view. So browser view actually gives you the option to choose all the artifacts that has been created. So for example, over here, you can see from the repository, all these different architecture status. So you can select this current state, which is what we are focusing on. And these are all the available diagrams, matrices that has been created. So again, that's another way where it allows people to understand the information. And this actually gives them the option or the ability to access all the artifacts that they are permitted to. So I'll go ahead and select one of these information party subject areas. So this actually gives me a view of the diagrams that have been created. And again, ABACUS actually allows you to change the different layout. So this, for example, if you are creating different diagram, whether it's a process diagram, in this case, it's from the information domain, you can actually, there's built-in different options that you can choose. For example, I can change this to orthogonal. I can change this to circular. So it depends the view you are building. ABACUS is actually trying to build or automatically change the layout so you can to minimize the manual work that you need to put in. So once you start building these different views with lots of components that included or different informations, you can use these particular features that allows you to auto change the layout, and then you can do the minimum changes when required. And of course, this might not be the perfect view you want to set, but this gives you option and save you some time And again, you can drag and drop creating new components if modification or update is required. And once that's done, as you can see, there's automatically committed to the collaboration server. Then this view or these changes will be made available to the broader team. Coming back to the dashboard, besides the diagrams, which allows you to design and populate the process, we also have other viewpoints that helps people to understand information and do their own impact analysis. So over here, we have this graph view. Again, this is based on the meta model that we designed, based on the attributes or the connections we have. So in this view, people can actually navigate through based on the information that's been given. So in this case, we have the projects at the highest level. Then within the projects, you can be categorized into different hierarchy levels. So we have programs that's been defined, for example, the customer first programs, and people can navigate through by selecting the elements they're interested in to see what are the projects under each programs. And by collecting the projects, this will show them all the connected components. So what are the potential risks that's been identified linked to these projects? What are the connected servers, processors, etc., that will be impacted by the projects? Again, to what level people can drill in, that also depends on the viewpoints that used to create this particular graph view. So that's another way where ABACUS allows people to do their own impact analysis and to understand once the information and attributes being created, what are the connected components and what are the potential impact they have if they want to make any particular change. Gantt chart is another way where people can understand the potential impact analysis, to do impact analysis and to understand the life cycle information. So based on the connected components, ABACUS will actually show the list of components that are connected to these particular projects and their life cycle information. So for example, your projects is going to end at this particular date. And from there, you'll be able to see these connected components, what are all these components being their life cycle information. So you can decide whether you need to extend or reduce your project life cycle date or end date, or you need to talk to the relevant party to extend, for example, the IBR application lifecycle recommendation stage end date in this case. So again, ABACUS makes it very easy. Once you have the information populated and the connection populated, you can easily understand the lifecycle information and manage that information accordingly. We have some other information or other portlet that allows people to navigate through as well. So for example, over here, we have the maximum and the minimum end date. So in this case, let's say if I want to understand what are the projects information going to be end by next year, I can use this sliding tool, which will filter that end of life cycle date accordingly. And in this case, it might be particularly useful if you're managing lots of applications or you have lots of processors, and you can identify or filter down to all the information to select the process application that you would like to manage. All right, it comes down to 10 minutes. So I'll stop the demo session and I'll try to answer some of the questions we have.
So the first comment was, how about an example of a transition to a target architecture plan, please? And a comment from, again, good overview of your tool. Thank you. That's very kind. So Zach, I'll pass back to you to get back on that point about an example of a transition to target architecture plan.
Yep. Thank you for the question. So I'll use one of our examples. So as we mentioned earlier, in ABACUS, you can actually create different architecture status. So what I'll do is I'll use one of our blank canvas. So by creating different architecture status, so you can start from your current state. So for example, over here, let's say we want to focus on business capability map. And this could be your current architecture status. And I'll add some process diagrams as well. So idea is you can actually put different architecture status side by side. And in this way, you are able to compare the differences between different architecture status. So over here, we have the current business capability map, the request information in this case, and then we can create a to-be state. So this part has to be done by if you want to create different architecture status, that's done by the ABACUS Enterprise Studio tool. But again, in the to-be state, you can put different two states side by side, and then make changes in the to-be state. So that would be your planned scenarios. And in this way, once you run different algorithms, you are able to understand what are the differences. So for example, in this case, yeah, we have this to-be state over here. And let's say I want to make different changes. I want to say in the to-be state, maybe create a different process by drag and drop. So all these new process you have to adding that actually happened in the to-be state instead of your current state. And while you're doing that, by putting different stages side by side, this data might not make sense in this case, but basically what we're trying to do here is actually understand your current state and understand your to-be state. And again, you can add different port load to understand, for example, how many process are a different life cycle stage, etc. And in this case, you can understand the gap. And once that to-be state is built and actual changes has been made in the to-be state, you can synchronize that into your current state. So you can bring your current state forward and understand what are the what change has been made, etc. So what I'm trying to do is just trying to find another examples.
I'll just answer a question quickly. So there was a question, what's the pricing model? Is it an annual subscription? So there is an option, or the most common way of purchasing ABACUS is via an annual subscription. There is also a way of buying ABACUS through a perpetual sale, meaning a big upfront license sale and then paying annual support and maintenance. The way our license model works, in short, is you choose what type of bundle you're purchasing and then add on your individual users. So whether they're enterprise users or studio users, hopefully that answers your questions. And then there's also various add-ons as well. So we can arrange a separate call if required. I'll pass back to you, Zach.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so this is one of the examples of having ERP on-premises and cloud transformation. So you can see the diagram shows what are the interfaces and all these availability complexity responses. So this actually calculated use our inbuilt algorithms and simulators to give you this score. So this is based on, for example, the availability of the servers in this case, and over here on cloud premises that based, of course, depends on the cloud providers. So once you run that and put them side by side, you'll be able to see what are the availability differences, the complexity differences in terms of the diagrams, what are the components will be included, the data domain in these cases. So yeah, it's very clear for you to see if you want to plan the scenarios, what are the potential differences, what's the gap between your current state and the what if state, and that actually guide you to make the decision.